Hi, everyone. This is Chuck O'Neill again on Thursdays at 6 p.m. on Florida Wildlife Advocates. Today, we're very, very fortunate to have a legend in environmental advocacy on this show. The gentleman that you're about to meet has experienced the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations of advocating for the environment, and he has paid the price dearly, and I want you to meet him now. Mr. Brian Beute, are you there?
Hey, Chuck, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
Great, thanks for having me.
You know, Brian, you're a legend. You're a folk hero here in Central Florida, if not around the country, for several different reasons. So what I would like to do, Brian, is to start telling your story, and let's go back to when you were an educator, a teacher. Tell us a little bit about your life before advocacy.
Sure. I am a native of West Michigan and moved to Florida in 2004, where I started my 8th year of 25-year career in education at a local prep school in Winter Park. And I was a band director and raised 2 kids now that are young adults. I've been married to my wife, Erin, for 28 years and moved to Seminole County in 2015. I was actually barely in Orange County in Winter Park from 2004 to 2015, but moved to Chuliota in 2015. And specifically because I wanted my kids and to see and enjoy wildlife, and we had an opportunity to be on a small lake and kind of renovate an older home, and so that's kind of the prelude to my introduction into Seminole County politics.
Well, Brian, you moved to Chuliota, right?
Yeah.
And you moved there for the rural lifestyle in Chuliota, correct?
Correct.
And at that time, when you moved there, one of the reasons why you moved there and you moved to Seminole County was the rural nature of Chuliota in that area, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So the reason why Chuliota is the way it is and Eastern Seminole's the way it is because of the rural boundary. And I'm going to pull up that rural boundary line right now. Okay, can you see that, Brian?
I can.
Describe for us the process by which Seminole County created a rural boundary.
Well, there's where I am. I was so new to the effort, which for me started in 2018, but I know some of the basic history, and there were swells of movements that wanted to preserve, given growth in Seminole County, wanted to preserve a portion of the county for less dense growth. Not preventing growth, but less dense growth. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in 1994, those efforts really kicked in. I don't know when the citizens voted, but they voted based upon a referendum language in one of the elections. I don't know if it was 94 or soon after, or 2004, but I know that the citizens voted to preserve that portion of Seminole County for less density. And so when you see that line, no, it's not, the line that we hear about at the southern border, it's certainly not even imaginary. It's not physical either. It's just a demarcation of where, property owners on one side are able to, develop based upon different standards. And then on the other side, based upon a set of different standards. And one thing that I've enjoyed sharing with others is that Seminole County is one of 2 counties to have that kind of designation. And actually, Orange County apparently is going to have one too now. And it's a unique part of Seminole County. I think it's one of the highlights that we should expect that our politicians highlight themselves. And the other part of what I like to describe sort of the unique characteristics of Seminole County is currently the 3rd most dense county in all of the state of Florida of 67 counties. And I would often ask the rhetorical question, do we want to be number 2? Because in those numbers, we're currently number 3, and that includes the data of the rural boundary. So if you eliminate that rural boundary, then you're going to increase density ultimately. And it could be drastic. So, back in 2018, that's where I started to get involved.
Well, you were just a mild-mannered teacher at that time, and you heard about a development that had been proposed that would cross into the rural boundary called River Cross. And let me pull up a picture of that. Can you describe this for us, Brian?
Sure. This proposal was brought to the attention of the community back in 2018, and maybe it was even late 2017. So this is, I believe, 600 plus acres, and it is just south of Chuliota proper and just basically on the Orange County, Seminole County line. And I don't know all the numbers. It's been a while. I mean, 2018 is 7 years ago now, but I do remember one number that I believe they're going to be the proposal was 1,500 plus homes, condominiums, and the number that myself and some others really caught our attention. It was the 1.5 million square feet of commercial, and there were no specs talking about how they're going to move water, how that development would properly move water, how it would properly remove sewage. None of that was part of the proposal, and it was always the assumption that, well, taxpayers are going to end up paying for that, and so that caused. We had an engineer on our board at the time, and we haven't even talked about Save Rural Seminole and how it started. But
let's get into that. So you're a mild-mannered teacher at this private school, and you and your wife and your kids have settled in Seminole County. You moved there because there was a rural boundary, and then all of a sudden there's this massive development on your side of the rural boundary that's proposed. And what did you do to get people together to form this Save Rural Seminole?
Right. Well, it's really important for me to emphasize at the outset of how I'll describe it move forward. This wasn't I didn't author it. And it's not that I am afraid to take some kind of ownership because I was very involved and instrumental. But this was a community effort, and there were certain community members in Geneva and Chuliota and even in adjacent Oviedo that would come. And I noticed some of that communication, and I noticed there was going to be an event at the Chuliota VFW in early 2018, I think, and I attended, and I met a couple of the folks who were speaking that night, and I let them know involved. And I think that folks, they needed someone to help organize them. The effort, I don't know where the effort was going to go, and I guess it doesn't matter because it's history now, but I thought, let's meet. We met at my home, about 12 people, and we formed Save Rural Seminole and, created a board. And interestingly enough, there ended up becoming another Save Rural Seminole, actually. So unfortunately, we had a split. But that split actually, I think, benefited the effort.
Let's go to a video of Brian.
(153) Overlook Drive, Chuliota. Mr. Chair, representatives, and fellow citizens, although I serve as president of the Committee to Save Rural Seminole County, I'm representing myself. By now, you are aware that our organization's efforts have communicated with thousands of citizens and procured numerous HOA letters of support for the current rural boundary standards. Let me share with you a few additional compelling reasons why you should unanimously deny the Rivercross application. First, I'd like to focus on the laws of supply and demand. By pushing the limits of zoning designation in the area, in essence, this application attempts to artificially manipulate the laws of supply and demand in an effort to create much higher profit margin in a short period of time. Strategies such as clever marketing and the threat of litigation, while legal, is an attempt to coerce citizens and puts you, our representatives, in a double bind. I don't have time to address the climate of affordable housing today, but honestly, how can a speculative endeavor of this magnitude possibly produce affordable housing and still profit? I'll tell you how, by requiring the taxpayers to supply hundreds of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure. To think that there might even be one vote of support for this application is in itself incredulous and a misrepresentation of the citizens' wishes. Finally, the petitioner is on record stating and writing, quote unquote, there are a great many ways to make money easier and less risky than this undertaking, unquote. Your denial of this application today should prompt the petitioner to seek other opportunities in areas designated for the kind of density that this application proposes. In closing, this application conveniently ignores the relationship between the citizens and their elected representatives. This application has not provided demonstrable need. There's no basis for its claims of judicial standing. And most importantly, you simply are not obligated to approve any proposal that does not meet the zoning characteristics of the property's location approved by the citizens of Seminole County. By denying this proposal, you are encouraging the petitioner to either reconsider an appropriate proposal that meets the specifications of this property's zoning designation, or to pursue free market solutions that address the petitioner's passion for providing affordable housing within areas that already provide the infrastructure necessary for high density developments. Thank you.
Flashback for you of your public comment, and well done to finish right at 3 minutes. I mean, a very polished. Lord knows many of us have trouble finishing what we have to say in 3 minutes. But so you presented to the Seminole County Commission. Tell us how they voted.
So I believe that one of the commissioners was quite ill, and Henley, I believe, Commissioner Henley. And so there were 4 commissioners, and they voted unanimously against the proposal.
So here's this massive proposal to cross into the rural boundary of Seminole County. You modestly helped organize Save Rural Seminole. You gave public comment there. I'm sure others in your organization gave public comment, and they voted it down. And you would think in a normal world that would be the end of it. You would go back to your job as a teacher and feel confident that you'd stop this development. But that's not how the story goes. From that point. From there, you decide to run for public office. Tell us a little bit about that adventure.
Well, I think the perception was that our endeavor as an organization was successful. And along with that success were associated feelings about individuals' success. And obviously I was the president. And often people in politics will start in a position and then they'll move to another position, and that's very, very logical. I thought, I probably should be running for maybe, some kind of other seat, maybe an appointment of some kind on a board. But, some folks said, we've got a real problem in our tax collector office. And, I remember seeing a lot of the news, not really paying attention to it. I also was subject of watching national news and not really paying attention to, other than this issue, the Rivercross proposal. I really was paying more attention to national news. That was, 2016 to 2018, a lot was going on in our country. So, some folks said, hey, why don't you study the tax collector office a little bit? And, this wasn't a group of people, by the way. It wasn't evidenced by the amount of money they raised. I mean, it wasn't a huge effort, but just the individual said, you'd be a good alternative to the then tax collector, Joel Greenberg. So on October 4th, 2019, after spending probably about 6 to 8 weeks studying what a tax collector does, and of course, Joel Greenberg's behaviors prior to 2018 and 2019, I decided to file on October 4th, 2019.
And then what happened, Brian?
Well, on the 18th, which is exactly 2 weeks later, I was summoned by the headmaster of the school I worked at. I was in my 17th year, and the school had received 9 identical anonymous letters claiming that I had raped a boy, that I had raped a student. And so in that meeting, I was astonished. To some degree, wasn't maybe surprised, because there were some shenanigans going on even prior to then associated with my efforts with Save Rural Seminole. So it just seemed to me that it was associated with running for tax collector, but it happened so quickly. I mean, within 2 weeks, I knew. Well, come to find out, Joel Greenberg had mailed these letters. They were received literally, remember, I filed on the 4th. They were received by the school on the 9th and the 10th. And so, Joel acted very quickly to remove me. I mean, that one of several efforts would have been enough to remove anyone. And
let me jump in here, Brian,
yeah.
because I'm sure at home when you talked about the content of these allegations, people are probably their jaws are dropping. There was not just one letter, correct? Was it 9 different letters?
They were 9 separate letters, but they were identical in content, and they were addressed to colleagues and my supervisors.
So these 9 letters went to your school, to the headmaster, to your colleagues, making this same allegation or different allegations?
Same allegation, same letter, just in 9 different envelopes addressed to 9 different individuals.
Needless to say, when you were called into the headmaster's office, I'm just imagining, is that when you learned about these letters?
Yes.
And, obviously the headmaster would hand the letter over to you. You read it. I'm sure your jaw dropped, just like everyone at home.
Let me interject. No, I wasn't provided the evidence.
You weren't provided?
Yeah, so the school, based upon mandatory reporting, would have turned over all that information to the Seminole County Sheriff's Office within 24 hours. That's my assumption.
So the school turns over the letters to Seminole, is it Seminole County or Orange County?
Seminole County.
Seminole County Sheriff's Office. And does Seminole County Sheriff's Office call you and call you in and ask you questions?
No. So
No.
I learned from the school 2 weeks after I filed, or you could say, a week and a half after the letters had been received.
Okay. So you found out like when they were received. And what was the presumption?
Well, my superiors were very professional. They didn't say that, I didn't do it, but, I think that I sensed that they knew that I didn't do it. And they also knew because I had asked my supervisor if it's okay if I run for public office prior. So, and we had already received an email from Jacob Engels in early 2019. So there was already interference going on with my employment several months prior to my even filing for tax collector. So there was a bit of a history there. I had a couple of meetings with the headmaster, and he knew that it was possible, something could happen again. And but the fact that it happened and the fact that it happened in the manner it did was really alarming. And it was a clear effort, of course, to interfere with my employment and, of course, interfere with my candidacy. And so I asked for administrative leave. I knew that I didn't want the school to put me on administrative leave because I didn't want them to be in that position. I felt that it was really professionally important for me to offer that. And of course, the nature of the accusation was such that it was obviously extremely serious. And so at that time, at that meeting on the 18th, I asked, and they granted it to me. I was on leave for a good 3 weeks, but I was cleared within that 3 weeks. I was probably cleared even before I knew about the letters. So, but to the credit of the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, they didn't reveal the status of where I stood for quite some time as the original suspect, I guess you'd say. And and of course I had asked David Bear, who was also on our board at that time, is now the president of Save Rural Seminole. I asked him to represent me, and David was incredible. There is no other attorney that likely would have taken on my case. I have my reasons for that I'll just keep personal, but David did, and he's just a remarkable human, and am forever grateful for his efforts.
Yeah, Brian, how did they find out who actually sent these letters?
Well, I have read. I've never sat in a private meeting telling me all the details, but I have read that his fingerprints and his DNA were found.
His being whose?
Joel Greenberg's fingerprints and DNA were found in the letters. We'll probably talk about this later, but in the original documents, original indictment, there is reference to a co-conspirator. That co-conspirator, to this day, I am not aware who that person is. Technically, I think I might know who it is, but in documents 37 and 38 in the docket, USA versus Joel Greenberg, there's reference to the search warrant. And in the search warrant, that co-conspirator is identified 15 times. So Joel Greenberg knows who the co-conspirator is. His attorneys know who the co-conspirator is. Obviously, the prosecutor knows who the co-conspirator is, but Brian Beute, to this day, still not know the name of the co-conspirator, the identity. And in fact, that document, would be document 4, is missing in the docket, and it's the identity is restricted. My assumption is that it's either an error, that person has cooperated, and I won't go as far as some pundits will suggest that that person may be paid off somebody. I don't believe that's true. So I think that it's likely that the co-conspirator cooperated with the federal investigators.
So the other part about this, Brian, is this: you talk about the federal investigators. Mm-hmm. Was this investigated by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, or it was not?
Supposedly, Joel Greenberg was investigated a few times by the FDLE when he was incorporating the use of guns and badges. Pam Bondi even intervened. Phil Archer requested her opinion on guns and the badges, and she basically balked and left soon after. And I think she went on to become a lobbyist, and of course now she is up for Attorney General of the United States of America. So she was ineffective, in my opinion, and then followed by Ashley Moody. She was clearly ineffective. I believe that Phil Archer was ineffective. The state failed. And here's how you know. We haven't talked about the numbers. Maybe we'll dive in some of those numbers. But Joel Greenberg is on record to have stolen $1.89 million, which was returned to Seminole County, by the way. How do you do that? How do you do that and get away with a robust system? Our governor claims that we're the best managed state in the union. No, I would beg to differ. We are not, because that would never have happened. $1 missing, okay, maybe 50 cents. What? $1.89 million over a 3-year period of time. So, I take great offense when Ashley Moody balks, when Bondi balked, when DeSantis doesn't get back to me. I publicly looked in the camera and asked DeSantis to intervene. Melinda Miguel could have done something. She's dependent on the governor. So, Florida as a state failed to investigate Joel Greenberg, period. He got away with it because of the state itself. So the federal investigators stepped in early 2019, and they were investigating him on some financial matters. But it took him committing a crime against an opponent to finally be indicted and arrested on June 23rd, 2020.
Let's go to a clip, right? This is the feds have now closed in on Joel Greenberg. He's under pressure for financial misdeeds, for sending these letters trying to make you out to be a horrible individual. So the feds, again, not the state, closes in on Joel Greenberg, and he finally admits he did all these bad things. And let's go to this next clip.
Breaking that new, former Seminole County Tax Collector Joel Greenberg officially pleading guilty to a list of federal charges, including child sex trafficking. Thanks for joining us this noon. I'm Bridget Ellison.
And I'm Justin Mormith. News 6 investigator Mike DeForest is live outside the federal courthouse in downtown Orlando for us. So what did Greenberg say today, Mike?
Justin, very little other than some yes or no questions posed by the judge about his understanding of this plea agreement. We're told that Greenberg showed very little emotion in court, even though he now faces at least 12 years in prison and possibly more. Just a little while ago, Joel Greenberg entered guilty pleas to 6 charges, the most serious, child sex trafficking. He also admitted to producing fake IDs, identity theft, wire fraud, stalking a political rival, and conspiring against the U.S. to steal federal CARES Act money. Now, in exchange for his guilty plea, prosecutors have dropped 27 other criminal charges that could have put him in prison for decades. Now, as part of this plea deal, Joel Greenberg must now cooperate with federal authorities on other investigations that presumably includes child sex trafficking. In court papers, Greenberg admits to paying a minor for sex, and he says other men did it too. The federal investigation into the former tax collector appears to have really begun after Greenberg now admits he tried to smear a political rival. Today, that one-time rival, a fellow Republican, called on Governor Ron DeSantis to investigate why state and local authorities failed to uncover the corruption at the tax collector's office before the feds did.
The state of Florida's oversight system was either complicit with or failed to monitor the Seminole County Tax Collector office. Why? Who is responsible for this failure?
Brian Beute is a private school teacher who decided to run against Greenberg. Within a week of his candidacy, Greenberg now admits he wrote a letter posing as a student accusing the teacher of being a pedophile. While investigating that stalking case, federal authorities discovered Greenberg's other crimes, including child sex trafficking. Now, according to published reports, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz is now being investigated as part of the Greenberg probe. Gaetz has denied any wrongdoing. He's never been charged with any crimes, and he's never been mentioned in court papers. As for Joel Greenberg, he will return to court here in about 2.5 months or so, where he will learn his sentence. Justin?
Mike DeForest, Live Force. Thank you, Mike.
Right. So Greenberg pleads guilty. As we know now, he goes back into court. He's sentenced to, 11 or 12 years in prison. He admits to child sex trafficking, and he says that there are other people who did it too. We fast forward out of that guilty plea. He goes to jail, and then I understand other people went to jail or were also implicated in crimes as well. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah. This happened over a long period of time. Joel Greenberg was arrested on the 23rd of June of 2020. He finally pled May 17th, 2021. And even within that period of time, there were others that were indicted and on various crimes that were uncovered because of the investigation of Joel Greenberg's personal belongings, emails, texts, and likely the feds were already on top of some of those other individuals, but was corroborated probably by some of the evidence that was provided to them just on the basis of his own arrest, and then of course a plea deal. And of course, then another longer period of time, and he finally was sentenced. So all in all, I believe 12 people were indicted. I believe 5 or 6 were or are in federal prison, and a couple are on some form of probation. A few others, I think, cooperated. The SBA loan situation, I think. Joel, of course, pled to stealing and scheming and conspiring, stealing money from the federal government through the SBA loans. So, and that happened after, by the way, he was arrested. It happened almost immediately after he was arrested when he committed those crimes. And, but I'd just like to say something right now, Chuck, back to the state, and that clip was, the timeliness of that, you're playing that clip was perfect. Joel Greenberg is made out to be this mastermind. Think about this a second. You're in the state of Florida, 67 counties, one individual, right? One individual causing all of these problems. You're going to pick some of these things up in the system. In business, people use what's called a CRM, right? And you have to use the CRM system properly. You have to learn how to use it. And so Joel was using, these state supplied systems, asking for state monies. He wasn't dependent. The tax collector office wasn't dependent on the county's coffer. And the county, to their credit, a couple of commissioners and the county attorney did make attempts at the state level to get something to happen with Greenberg, and it didn't. So when I said in that video and asked the rhetorical question, is the state complicit, or is the state just a terrible system, and maybe that has something to do with the Constitution itself, where a tax collector and 4 other seated employees are considered constitutional officers, and they're supposedly, they have this autonomy, this independence, and a certain part of our population in Florida likes that and lauds the fact that we have independent constitutional officers. Well, if Joel Greenberg is any example of what goes wrong with that independency, then the state needs to look at its constitution, needs to look at its mechanisms. And here I am saying this in 2025, but I was asking for this to happen well into, back at about 5 years ago. So, I'll ask a rhetorical question for your audience. Is this the state constitution that needs to be addressed? Is it endemic of a party having a supermajority in the state of Florida and not having a strong opposition party? I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of all of those. But, operatives and politicians and those who are being groomed to become politicians, they're learning where the gaps are. And Joel Greenberg learned where the gaps were. And but I just don't. It's hard for me to believe, and I just to this day I cannot agree that the state of Florida wasn't aware somehow that there were some things going on. Even Pam Bondi in 2017 or 18, prior to DeSantis and his first term in 2019, she knew things were going on. Archer knew things were going on. And $1.89 million weren't just stolen, the day before he was arrested. And so, yeah, if I'm an activist in anywhere that might be outside of, what you do with wildlife and conservation efforts, it would be that the state itself failed the Seminole County citizens, all of the state of Florida, frankly, and it failed me and my family.
Brian, this is an unbelievable thing that happened to you. And what's even more unbelievable is that Greenberg was not stopped prior to mailing these letters. As you said, he was looked at or under investigation, and then that investigation led to nothing by our state attorney general, and all the way through the executive branch. So he got a pass. He was allowed to continue on, and it wasn't until you got involved with the feds, let's call it what it is, who came in, did the investigation, and put him and 11 others under scrutiny, some of which went to jail, some of which pled out, some may still be in jail. Now, when you look at that experience and your experience, you would think, the normal person would think, well, that's it for Brian Beute. He's going to fade into the sunset, and we're grateful to him, but we'll probably never hear from him again. But instead, and this is 2 years later, you decide to take another crack at it. So let's go to that clip.
One of the most watched local races next year will deliver a new supervisor of elections to Seminole County. It's a key race with the county evenly divided among Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And with the Republican supervisor electing not to run, Democrats are hoping to regain the seat for the first time in 4 decades.
Western News political reporter Greg Fox talks with the 2 people who have already filed to run, including one man who was a target of disgraced former tax collector Joel Greenberg.
Okay, and it ramps up.
Politics has been an uphill climb for Brian Beute. The former teacher, who now runs a consulting business for local roofing companies, was targeted in a smear campaign by former Seminole County Tax Collector Joel Greenberg when Beute ran to try and unseat Greenberg in 2020. He learned then just how dirty politics can be.
I don't recall a time in
at least recent history when, a candidate was attacked the way I was attacked, and I didn't quit.
Greenberg was convicted and sentenced for stalking his opponent. But Beute lost to new tax collector J.R. Kroll. Now the Republican is running to replace retiring supervisor of elections Chris Anderson, with a goal of making sure the office is spending taxpayer money wisely and revisiting all voting options, including early and mail voting.
So I want to look at the supervisor of elections from top to bottom, obviously, like anyone would. It's an open seat. It's an opportunity for us to look at, what is it that we're doing well, and we let it be, and what is it that we can go ahead and mitigate.
Certainly an open seat for supervisor of elections in any county is going to draw a lot of candidates, but in particular in Seminole County, where voter registration among Republicans and Democrats is just about even.
Voting is about our freedom, and it matters a lot to me that we have the best possible access to voting in Seminole County.
Okay, Brian. So this is it was 2 years later or 3 years later, you try to give it another whirl, and in under the category if you can't keep a good man down, you try again, and what transpired there? What happened?
Well, I filed as a Republican in early 2003. I think it was March. And started to build a good, solid campaign, more support than I had in the prior race for tax collector. I was running, basically at that point, I'd be running against Deborah Palalian, who did, of course, continue on. And then
let me just stop you right there. This was 2003 or 2023?
23, my apologies.
2023. Sorry. Okay, yep. I'm just trying to keep timelines.
I'm so old, I can't remember which decade.
Hey, believe me, I feel your pain.
All right. So March 2023, I filed as a Republican. I was a lifelong Republican. And, it was a solid beginning. I was up against Deb Palalian. Chris Anderson was the seated tax or supervisor of elections. He had one week said he was not going to file, which prompted my filing. And then as soon as I filed, a week later, he said, I think I've decided I'm gonna run again. And then Amy Pennick joined the Republican primary. And so at that point, it's a three-way race in the Republican side. And, I had to decide, am I really a Republican under the current term or description of a Republican? Am I a Republican anymore? And so I had some conversations with a couple of independent parties. And, I've even been asked to, not by Deb, but or anybody seated in a position of authority, but some Democrats said, why don't you consider becoming a Democrat and running for office as a Democrat? So I thought about that a little bit. And so I talked to the Forward Party, and I really found that the Forward Party's message and their philosophy, it really fit me and my efforts as a teacher, as a citizen, as a Save Rural Seminole advocate, and as even just a candidate. And that is that, we ought to limit this dichotomy, this purposeful construct known as our two-party system. And the Forward Party, said, hey, we're going to give you a good amount of support. Would you consider, So I did before the deadline. I joined the Forward Party and I continued on as a candidate, but ultimately there just was no traction. And I don't know if it was based upon my candidacy. I think probably because a third party at this point is just not gaining traction. And so I decided, there's just no pathway. And, already someone had stolen brianbeute.com and was redirecting it to my Republican opponent at the time and her website. And, they were likely going to probably post my bankruptcy publicly, which was private at the time. And so I just decided, I could handle this maybe, but I'm not putting my family through this again. And so I decided to bow out.
You referred to your financial problems. Those financial problems came after Joel Greenberg sent the letters to your employer, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I carried some debt, like I think probably most Americans do. But I'd say what really ultimately caused that, I lost reference point. I lost myself. I didn't waste money. It came to the point where I could no longer fight. I ended up leaving Trinity, and I was unemployed for a period of time. I was underemployed. I'm still basically roughly, I'm unemployed, looking for a second career. And so it messed with my head. There's no doubt. I've gone through paranoia, So, I was, someone would just say, hey, you look funny, or, you only raised $20,000. No, I was accused of something that just, it destroyed me. It did. And I've had to rebuild not just my life mentally, but I've had to rebuild it financially. And so, we're doing that. I didn't take the easy route. I didn't file to, have, someone absorb all my debt. I filed for Chapter 13, so it's a restructuring. And, so I'm going to end up paying it back, but just over a longer period of time. And this isn't something I've talked about even publicly. There's been a sense of shame, I think. And my family understands, but it's just not something a dad or a husband wants to talk about. And I guess I felt compelled to do that since you asked.
Yeah, well, you've been incredibly forthcoming in this interview, and I've always had respect for you, Brian, from the get-go. From the start of the River Cross battle all the way through it. And I think anyone who's familiar with your story, your saga, and the trials and tribulations, and how you went from a victim to a person who basically upended an entire system that had been sheltering this elected official who had run amok and had no moral compass. Just a brief reading of the charges against him, what didn't he do? This guy was, basically driven to insanity by virtue of the power that he had through elected office. And, what he did to try to retain that office to you, and what he would have done had you not brought him down, where would he be? I mean, would he be considering running for governor right now? I mean, even though that sounds absurd, it's not that absurd. After this second attempt, and after your trials and tribulations and your personal financial problems, you are more or less in a position of stepping back from Save Rural Seminole. The Save Rural Seminole is continuing on in protecting the rural boundary. But in addition to that, not only bringing down probably one of the most notorious figures in Central Florida politics, but in also stopping one of the most powerful developers in Central Florida from crossing the rural boundary and building this mega development in the rural area. And in addition to that, I mean, if that wasn't enough, if you look at Seminole County now and the Seminole County Commission, who were at the time, and I remember at the time, they were not unanimously opposed to this river cross. Now, now they may say, no, we were all against it. It's like, I don't think so. I think it really took the group that you were instrumental in putting together to make public comment and stick with it and, point out how impactful this could have been if this development had been able to breach the rural boundary. Where does it end? If it's okay for one, it's okay for the other. And the thing about the rural boundary in Seminole County is all it takes is a simple majority of the county commission to vote in favor of a development, right? Isn't that right?
Well, a supermajority now.
It's supermajority now, but at the time, it was just I think
3-2.
Yeah, 3-2. They have 5 commissioners, so all it would have taken is 3 commissioners to vote in favor of this, and it would have been off to the races because the next developer, if they had approved River Cross, the next developer who tried to cross would sue based on the fact that they allowed River Cross, right? And then the third one in line would sue because they allowed the last 2, and you would not have a rural boundary. It would make a rural boundary just a line somewhere drawn between subdivisions. So, the effect that your advocacy had is with us today. And I'm going to go to our last clip to give you an idea of what Seminole County is like today.
Conservation and development, they are taking center stage in Seminole County. Commissioners, they're looking at protecting rural enclaves with urban areas as a year-long study takes place. Tomorrow, county leaders will talk about Forever Seminole. It's a program similar to Forever Florida to preserve rural lands. Spectrum News 13's Katie Stride. She is laying it all out for us live tonight. Katie, why this push to preserve?
Hey, Tammy. Well, it started as a grassroots effort, and now it's being spearheaded by Seminole County leaders. It's a way to balance the development and also conserve our rural areas. So I talked to both a resident and a commissioner about it. Seminole County dad David Bear is a lifelong Floridian.
What I love about Florida is being able to take them out to the springs, take them out to the wilderness area so they can do some hiking and see, what real natural Florida is.
David's advocating has led to change in Seminole County. He now sits on the Seminole Forever Board, looking at rural areas to buy with the general fund to preserve as natural lands for the public to use. The Seminole County Board of Commissioners is set to finalize a revamp in the application process during Tuesday's meeting.
Once that's approved, then the committee will accept applications and we'll start reviewing parcels to see, hey, is this a good use of the Seminole Forever funds to buy this parcel?
While Seminole Forever is brought up in Tuesday's meeting, the county is also conducting a year-long study about how to protect rural enclaves and urban areas. The areas being looked at include Lazy Acres near Longwood and Oak Hollow near the Orange County line. It's something Commissioner Bob DeBary says is needed as Seminole County continues to grow.
So what should we do to protect those areas, or what should we do to ensure that whatever is happening today that we like continues to happen, and whatever happens today that we don't like doesn't happen for the future? We always should be looking at that.
As for David, he's happy about the progress Seminole County has made when it comes to conservation and protecting rural areas.
It's important to recognize positive places when you're there. And Seminole County is not perfect by any means. And so nobody should misinterpret that. But we're in a pretty darn good place today between leadership and the community activists.
Seminole County Board of Commissioners, they'll meet tomorrow morning, and they're going to be talking about revamping that application and finalizing the Forever Seminole program. Live in Seminole County, Katie Straight, Spectrum News.
Hey, Katie, well, just last week, Orange County residents voted
Okay, Brian, and at the end of that, they were talking about Orange County voting to create a rural boundary, both on the east and the west side. And so, from an environmental advocate's point of view, the trials and tribulations that you went through, the heavy price that you paid, the heavy price that your family paid, has borne fruit, and that fruit is the other counties are looking at creating these rural boundaries, seeing that River Cross was defeated when it went to court to try and challenge the Seminole County Commission. The testing of the Seminole County Commission under fire has only emboldened them to preserve more land and pockets that aren't even in the rural boundary. I believe they've bought at least 2, maybe 3 golf courses to preserve them and give wildlife room to live and breed and people to enjoy. So, with this, do you feel that your entire endeavor and all the pain and the sorrow and the grief and the financial hardship, do you think it was worth it for you?
I do. Here's why. This wasn't just my effort. I was, by choice and by vote, the face of Save Rural Seminole, and took some unwarranted heat from political operators. But ultimately, I think it has, and you just described it beautifully, it's led to a more universal acceptance. I think the rural boundary, the referendum to obtain a supermajority was 87%. But I think it's also important for me to represent folks who live inside of the dense part of the county. And what I mean by that is, I've some friends in Altamont Springs, and they've been subjected to some pretty horrible flooding over the past couple of years through a couple of storm cycles. And, those folks deserve commissioners looking at infrastructure. So, I think that the effort of preservation must be a broader effort, not just to preserve lands that even people who live in the dense part of the county support. Clearly, 87%, across the entire county supported that referendum of 4-1 vote. But I do think the next step is addressing redevelopment efforts and to potentially put a moratorium. I mean, is the goal to be the second most dense county in the state of Florida? Is that the goal? Because by square mileage, Seminole County isn't, it's probably near the bottom, but it's near the top in density. And some people would say, well, obvious, it's adjacent to and north of Orlando, a major city, Orange County. But I still would argue and say, okay, well, but that's not addressing the question. The question is what's the goal? Is the goal to become number 2? And yes, there'll be growth in other counties that are number 1 and number 2, but what's the rate of growth in Seminole County and why? Why must Seminole County even grow? And I just think that these questions should be asked, and the folks who live in the dense part of the county deserve, maybe not necessarily Save Rural Seminole's efforts, but they deserve better the scrutiny of development. And so I really need to mention that, right? If I were elected, for instance, as a commissioner, that would be something that I think is deserved of review. Every small city on that part of the county really needs to look at its development plans. And frankly, it probably needs a moratorium, frankly, because look at Altamont Springs. I mean, that ought to be turned into a study.
And that's going on in Volusia County right now. They're looking at a moratorium on development, and I'm not familiar with the details of it, but I know that's happening. Now, before we finish up, Brian,
Sure.
I saw or heard on a podcast that your wife has an interesting project going on.
Yes. I revealed this probably 3 years ago, that my wife was working on a film. And so she wrote a screenplay that is well into development. They call this, in her line of work, pre-production. It is in the pre-production stage, nearing production. And I'll just leave it at that because that's her arena and I don't want to reveal too much. But yes, there is a film. And I still have, some goals. Number one goal recently is, I really, our country's media isn't looking me up. Instead, what's happening is on the right side of the political spectrum, they're protecting Matt Gaetz right now. And the recent effort, actually this effort's been ongoing since Greenberg was arrested, is to scapegoat Greenberg. Yes, as you've described, all of the crime that Joel Greenberg and all of these other characters had committed, they are awful, terrible. I think the state was either complicit or just poor managers. But yes, I was the victim of Joel Greenberg, but he shouldn't be scapegoated. And he's being scapegoated. He's being scapegoated by people who were not just adjacent, but were involved with his behaviors, in particular, Matt Gaetz. And, I know that you probably don't want to be too political, but this is more about ethics and honor and integrity than it is a party. And, Matt Gaetz' efforts and those who are his apologists, whether they're hired or not, don't know. But they've been claiming that what happened to Matt Gaetz, whatever Joel did to him supposedly, is the same that Joel did to me. And I have been attacking that narrative aggressively. And it's disappointing, to say the least, that there's such a political effort. But recently we're seeing that Matt Gaetz is claiming that, yeah, I'm seriously looking at running for governor in the state of Florida. And that cannot happen. Matt Gaetz does not have the moral character or integrity or honor to be serving in any capacity, whether elected or whether through appointment. And there's a reason why he's no longer the United States Attorney General nominee. And he should just frankly go and practice law. Like, he ought to do what the rest of us do, become private citizens again and run a small business. But he can't help himself. And so we're going to have to help make sure that he is not elected as the next governor of the state of Florida. And I will probably be participating in some form or another. So this whole effort of scapegoating Joel Greenberg, I've had enough of it. And I know some people would ask, well, why would you do that? Well, there's a co-conspirator still that's not, he might be identified from Joel's perspective and his attorneys and prosecutors, but I don't know. And I don't think that's right. I think any victim ought to know who's been perpetrating crime. Joel Greenberg obviously is paying the penalty, but he shouldn't be scapegoated, and the federal government should release the identity of the co-conspirator in my case. So I still have some efforts that I'm involved with, Chuck, and they might be an extension of the efforts. I didn't think that project, River Cross, was appropriate. I didn't think that Joel Greenberg was appropriate as tax collector. And as an extension of his relationship, I don't think that Matt Gaetz is appropriate for the governor of the state of Florida.
Well, Brian, I mean, over this past hour, you've been incredibly brave and forthcoming in talking about what happened to you when you threw your hat, when you stepped into the arena as Teddy Roosevelt said a long time ago, the man in the arena. And you entered that arena and were attacked viciously, cruelly, and at great cost. Your living, your family security were all taken away from you. And now, if someone watching this, wants to reach you or talk to you, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, I'm not a huge social media guy, so my professional, I guess, social media is LinkedIn, my preferred method. So I'm Brian A. Beute on LinkedIn, and you can, add a like or whatever they call it there, and I'd be happy to chat with you.
Okay, and it's some major, well, Hollywood is up in flames right now, but if some producer executive producer wanted to get behind this production that Aaron has written, they would contact her through you and in your LinkedIn. Is that correct?
That, or she has a website, erinbeute.com, or she's also on LinkedIn as well.
And it's E-R-I-N, correct?
E-R-I-N, same last name.
Okay, same last name.
Yep.
All right, wow. I think I need to go lie down, Brian. This has been a powerful, powerful interview, and I'm sure everyone who's watched it, they may have heard snippets of this or that in the newspaper or what happened. And, it pains me that this kind of thing happened to you and that the state did not step in to stop it, that it took the federal government and the Department of Justice to actually stop this from happening, because there was no stopping this guy. He was a man without any barriers, any moral compass. And I know you may think, well, that he's being scapegoated, but no, he deserves every bit of shame that's heaped on him, and I hope it follows him for the rest of his life, what he did to you. So with that, Brian, I thank you so much for being on Florida Wildlife Advocates, and look forward to our next broadcast. We'll be on every Thursday at 6. So for Brian Beute, this is Chuck O'Neill, your host, saying good night.
Thanks, Chuck.